Well, I mean, you're going to experience closed-mindedness in anything because most adults are not apt for change. So making people step outside their comfort zone, especially when you're already stressing them out on a tennis court in an aggressive manner physically, that's also challenging. And, that's one of the biggest hurdles when training. Footwork and positioning in the court is everything. It's the beginning, it's the end, it's everything to tennis. And especially with the way these athletes, I mean, you're talking about robo athletes now. They're so magnanimous that if you don't beat them with positioning in the court, you'll never beat them. There's always something you can do. You have to step outside of your comfort zone. Think outside of your space and not worry about what other people think or what else may happen because of what you do.
Yeah.
So take ownership is the number one answer. Take ownership of things that you need to do to stay healthy.
Hi there, I'm Sifu Slim, and if you folks would do us a big favor, go right down below and hit the like button. That goes a long way in supporting the channel. And the other thing is, if you have a comment or a question, please list it down there. We ask you to be respectful, kind, open-minded, open-hearted. You can be as silly as you want, but the intentions here are to bring you content that you can use for better performance, better relaxation, better connection to your mind, body, and spirit, your karma, if you believe in that type of thing. And it puts you on a path that will allow you to be the best you can be. So I'm Sifu Slim, author of The Aging Athlete. I'm an author of Sedentary Nation, my first book. And I'm also the author of Raising a Child Athlete, ? Things You Need to Know. And it's interesting that when we talk about all these things, this idea of performance is trying to compete with the idea of balance and not overloading the system. So that's an important difference that we need to take account of, because if you're a human performance vehicle, you're being coached to win, coached to do whatever it takes, you could break down, and we don't want that. We want you to have a good life of increased connection to yourself so you know when to go and when to go medium, when to slow down and regroup. So I'm going to bring in a doctor who's a tennis coach and a former tennis professional. And he's quite a guy, and he comes from a family lineage that's very interesting. So I'm going to ask Tareem Heath to introduce himself. Remy is his nickname, so I'll call him Remy during the interview. But say hello, Remy, and tell us
Hello,
what's
everybody.
up.
Hello, everybody. Coming to you live and in person, Washington, D.C. I just got off of a 12-hour shift, so I'm extremely exhausted. But Sifu really, really needed me to be on this show at this time, so I'm here for him as much as possible. We had our first training session this past weekend, and hopefully I'll see him this weekend. So adding a little bit of balance to an already busy and hectic schedule, I also compete and train aggressively. And so I'm here for every topic he has outlined as he outlined before. Does that make sense?
That makes perfect sense. So Remy was my first chance at living a moment like Andre Agassi, Jim Courier, not McEnroe. I don't think he did this type of training back in the 60s and 70s when he was a young lad. Let's think of some modern people. Djokovic over in Belgrade, Serbia. They would have been doing the types of drills that I had a chance to do with Coach Remy the other day on some public courts. And I guess the reason I said yes is because I'm ready for it. And the reason he said yes is because he saw another chance to help a fellow learner of tennis to get to a level that might be beneficial for him. So tell me if that's any of that stuff resonates with you.
Absolutely. I don't train for recreational play. I train for competitive play because I also compete. So any athlete or any individual that steps on the court with me, I make that firsthand knowledge. This training is for competitive play. We train to strike the ball aggressively. I'm a footwork and position specialist thanks to my coach. And so I want to make sure that what I'm asking of myself, I'm also asking of my students. I wouldn't ask my students to do anything that I myself don't train to do while on court with them in a group setting or off court in my own personal time. So whatever I'm developing is what my students are developing in real time.
So we have to be open-minded, and this idea of open-mindedness versus closed-mindedness, it's a difficult thing because we're taught by one system, one organization, one professor of a certain way, and we could wall ourselves off and shield that knowledge and never step outside of that realm. For example, let's say someone's just studied the psychiatry of Freud, and Freud lived in the 1800s, passed away in the early 1900s. Let's say they never went beyond that. Now, that wouldn't be a complete disaster because Freud is the most
Right.
widely published body of work as of 10 years ago in the psychiatric field. But there are other things that can be used to help patients and to help the doctor himself or herself get to places that they want to go, advancing their professionalism. So tell us, Remy, if you've encountered closed-mindedness in the learning of tennis and then also in the learning of the medical profession.
Well, I mean, you're going to experience closed-mindedness in anything because most adults are not apt for change. So making people step outside their comfort zone, especially when you're already stressing them out on a tennis court in an aggressive manner physically, that's also challenging. And, that's one of the biggest hurdles when training beginning students or new students in tennis or in any type of athletics. When it comes to the medical profession, not so much, but everybody has a different makeup, everybody has a different circumstance.
Did you have what many doctors discuss after getting out of medical school, limited training in nutrition? Like some may have had 4 days in a period of almost a decade of medical school and residencies, this type of thing.
One more time. What was that question? One more time.
Limited training in your MD schooling on nutrition.
So, Emory's program is quite comprehensive. So, and I also did a quite comprehensive fellowship and residency period. So limited training, I experience only when I come into contact with people who either the DO I mean, not to isolate DOs, but their programs aren't as extensive as ours, as the MD program, and then I did MD PhD. So yes would be the answer, the short answer to your question.
Yes, you did have what you consider significant or not so significant
Not
nutrition
so
training.
significant on my end, but definitely on their end.
So you're saying the osteopaths had more nutrition training?
I mean, they had significant training. They just had a different type of training than the MD program. It's a lot less comprehensive, should I say.
Okay. I'm going to hit the share screen and we're going to listen to the author of Born to Run, his talk at Google. He wrote his book in 2009. So this talk was within a year to 3 years after that. His name is Christopher McDougall, and he's invigorated the discussion on wearing shoes or no shoes when people are running, and then limited sole footwear.
Period. And that was the same question that a much smarter and more knowledgeable guy than I am, particularly about running, a guy named Dr. Joe Vigil, a man with various PhDs and master's degrees sort of bristling out of his resume. He's the most successful and probably most beloved running coach in American history. He was the track and cross country coach at Adams State College. Have any of you ever heard of Adams State College? Okay, proves my point. Okay, it's a nondescript, tiny little school in Alamosa, Colorado. But the one thing they're known for is they could kick the crap out of anybody in cross-country races. Dr. Joe Vigil is the only guy who take walk-on runners, and he blanked out the field in the NCAA cross-country championships, meaning the first 5 people across the line were his 5 runners. So essentially the race was over and done before the first guy from another team even showed up. Dr. Joe Vigil is successful because he has a raging sense of vulnerability. He can't believe that there's not something out there that someone's going to figure out before him and it's going to thrash him. And that's the reason why one of the few times that these reclusive runners, known as the Tarahumara, one of the few times they've ever turned up at the Leadville Trail 100 Ultra Marathon, Dr. Joe Vigil was there, which meant that at the age of nearly 70, this old man was standing out in the Colorado Rockies at 12,000 feet in the dark at 4 o'clock in the morning, waiting for a bunch of guys to come running by in robes and sandals. What he saw then, he saw the Tarahumara come ripping by him at mile 60. Okay, this is 60 miles into a 100-mile race on steep terrain. And the moment he saw them is a part of the course where you just passed the 60-mile mark and you've got to go up this really steep dirt embankment that seems to be there for no other reason other than to just really beat the crap out of runners. And there's no matter how good a race you're having, that embankment is just gratuitous torture. And what Vigil saw when he saw the Tarahumara come running up there was something he'd never seen on a runner's face ever. And of all the things he could have picked out, I was impressed by the fact that he was not interested in the Tarahumara's nutritional strategy, on their race tactics, on their biomechanics, on their physiology, on their footwear. What he couldn't understand was, what the hell are these guys so happy about? Why are they smiling? The worst possible part of the course, these guys are having a blast. And
I'm going to ask Remy if he has any thoughts on this smiling throughout a race that's got difficult conditions, and now they're going uphill, mile 60, and they're on a high.
Right. And so, and another thing that I teach my students is definitely yearning or not yearning, but nurturing the power of positivity, embracing the strife, the stress of it all. And so one way to do that is keep a smile on your face no matter the conditions. So I definitely resonate and understand where he's coming from in that instance.
So this professor at an unknown school in Colorado, Legend Coach Award U.S. Track and Field, Joe Vigil, Vigil, born 1929, and he's renowned. So he figured out something way back when, before the many of the masses of the elite, sponsored by Nike, sponsored by Adidas, coaches were baffled because this guy who had walk-on runners had the first 5 finishes in these programs that, you know, he had to compete with people like at Stanford and UCLA and Columbia and University of Alabama and these, you know, University of Ohio State, gigantic schools where people, you know, had been running for, you know, since the time they were 6 or 10 or 12. And they've been trained. They've got the physical therapist. They know nutrition. They've got the latest shoes. But what they didn't have is this native, old school, old culture thing that goes back to prehistoric time of being able to use your hormones, your breath, your mindset in a completely different way. It's like Mr. Miyagi curing Daniel-san when he had an injury. You know, where's this power? Where's this chi coming from? So over to Remy and here's some more thoughts on this superhuman type of a performance based on joy.
I mean, I couldn't have said it better than you. I can't say it better than you just put it. That's the type of euphoria I get, even in patient care, in all aspects of life. My 3 passions are tennis, swimming, and boxing. I feel it's, I mean, especially swimming, you feel like most runners get what they call a runner's high. I get sort of what they call a swimmer's high, in similar instance. I mean, it's no greater joy than doing things that you love doing. And if you can take, even when you're training and it may not be fun, you have to keep that joy and let that joy resonate throughout your body, if that makes sense.
Oh yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I think the idea of euphoria is an important part to present to people because it comes from the ancient Greek word euphoros, which means well-being. It
Hmm.
means health, and it doesn't mean health as in we're going to do a lot of tests and we're going to print out something and you're going to look like this. It's really this whole mind, body, and spirit health. When you do feel good, you do your sweat and then
Right.
you stretch. We did yoga with Remy the other day after quite an extensive tour of fitness and tennis training combined with some minor technical tips that Remy wanted me to work on. We did 20 minutes of yoga at the end, and he called me up. I believe it was later that day, and asked me how I was feeling. It might have been the next day,
I think it
and
was the next day. Yeah.
yeah, the next day, and I was glad to report that at 61, because I do fitness, because my nutrition, sleep, my tennis ball rolling, myofascial release,
Right.
because of low stress, because a lot of these things were clicking, and I had a coach who believed in his system. He believed in me enough to show me his system, and then we did the yoga at the end without a lot of discussion. Just here it is. Let's embrace it. We did that, and then I walked away. I felt like I was in balance. And so my healing process was naturally able to do its thing so that the following day when Remy called me, I was feeling good. And now I know that I can do it so that I know I can take that level on and work on my footwork even more if all that
Right.
other stuff that I started with is also functioning, right? If I come in
Yes,
stressed
absolutely.
out with some stomach distress, then I have to recalibrate. But if I'm feeling the same as I did last time with my new added comfort of adapting to his program, then I can try to extend that a little bit and do a little bit better. Over to
It's
Remy.
funny. It's funny that you mentioned stomach discomfort. I don't know if you remember or not, but on during the practice session, your practice mate, the other mem- gr- team member that practiced with you, he was this. I mean, he practices with me every single day. I'm in Savannah. So the night before he came to the evening session, he had tons of stomach discomfort. And then the following morning, he said even though he practiced with that discomfort, he kept that energy, he kept that joy, and he pushed through, and he felt so much better that next morning when he was training with you.
Well, I'm amazed that he was able to do that. We've seen tennis tournaments where I remember there's one famous one. I'm not sure if it was the finals or quarters or when it was, but Connors later in his career had some stomach distress, and it was something to the point of every 8 minutes, every 12 minutes, he had to run off and use the facilities.
Right,
And he
right,
came back and they said that I think that rule has been changed since then. I
right.
can't remember precisely, but you're only allowed to have so many physical therapy or coaching breaks when you get a cramp or your knee goes out or what have you.
A
And I
medical
think,
timeout, correct.
yeah, I think it's the same for the restroom breaks. Does that make sense?
I don't think it's the same for the restroom breaks, but it may be. I mean, I know the pro tournament is different from the challenger, and of course the women's tour is different from the men's. But I think you can go to the bathroom on changeovers if you can make it in time, if you get a pre-approval, but it has to be on changeovers.
And so it's on a changeover, an odd game you're saying. So you've got the game after your break, is it a minute and a half
You have
that you have?
you have a minute and a half, correct? So 90 seconds. And like I said, a bathroom break is going to take longer than 90 seconds, so you have to get pre-approval from the umpire. So where the rules are with the pre-approval and the excess time is lays with the umpire, is my understanding.
So Remy, can you tell us about your junior career and your family a little bit and how you got into this medical
Sure,
field
sure,
and
sure.
research PhD type things you were doing?
So I started playing tennis at 6 years old. My mom took me right there in Savannah. I grew up in Savannah, Georgia. My mom was really adamant about us playing sport. We played a bunch of instruments. There's six of us, two sets of twins in front of me and my little sister. Um, My mom, also a physician, was also instrumental in taking me to Daffin Park and signing me up for their juniors program. They had just introduced a new city program for tennis for juniors in the inner city. It was about four 40, 50 kids, if I remember correctly. And I made the cut the first day. They cut down to about around half. And yeah, that was the start of 4 years of playing. I won the Georgia State Championship at 9 and 10 years of age. My little sister was also training with me at the time, and she stayed 2 years after I did, but she won 3 years in a row, the state championship for Georgia at uh, 9, 10, and 11 years old. My mom, like I said, she was big into tennis. She had a couple of cousins, all of our family members, either tennis, swimming. That's just a thing. My dad is a golfer, scratch golfer, and so yeah, I mean we study and we play tennis. That's basically our family motto:
And
medicine and tennis.
was it a grandfather or your father? Who was the first MD in the family?
So my grandfather on my mom's side did not he was a, he went to he was an educator and then turned around and went to Winston-Salem and got Winston-Salem State University, North Carolina, and got his BSN and later got his nurse practitioner. And then all of his children, my mom and her brothers and sisters, became physicians.
And the idea of being a scholar athlete, was it a natural progression from a hand down from your family, or is that something that you took it under yourself, or you had a great teacher who motivated you to go into that direction?
After my parents let me quit playing tennis at 10 years of age,
Tell us
and
about that. Tell us about the end of the junior tennis circuit.
okay, so the end of the circuit looked like this. I was beating all of my friends. My friends stopped playing, so it wasn't really something that I was interested in anymore. And having the type of family that I have, where they push mainly education, mostly medicine in every aspect, even since birth, we were indoctrinated and brainwashed into going into medicine. So you can imagine what that looks like as a homeschool.
Was somebody helping you with homework
Yes,
and things?
my grandmother and my grandfather were both educators. So, it was my mother's regime was handed down to my grandparents to instill in us, in which they did very well.
So you left tennis, and tell me about how that happened. Was it just one day you said, "Here's my racket, it's going in the closet"? How'd you do that?
Basically, yeah, my dad had came home from New York one Friday, and it was, of course, time for practice. And I was not downstairs and ready. He came up to the room, and I said, "Dad, I really just do not want to go anymore." And he said, "Well, what do you want to do?" He said, "What do you want to do?" It's like, "Well, we could go to the beach." We were in Savannah. And so he got us all together. We went to the beach, and that was the end. And then Saturday, when my sister's turn to go to practice, he asked me then, "Do you want to practice?" And I said, "No, I think I'm done." And he allowed me to let it be. And so 2 years later, after my sister won, he let it be. So
And
it was this discussion between him and my mom
and your sister retired also at a young age?
at 11 years old after
Wow.
winning the championship.
Wow. And tell me what your high years of training were at age 9, 10, 11, whenever your height of peak performance was. What was the training and commitment like?
The commitment was sort of similar to what I do now. We had a practice session morning, so it looked like about 7, 8 o'clock in the morning. Before my grandparents got in, we were on the court with Coach Jenkins, from just an amazing coach in Savannah. Passed away a couple of years ago. Um, but me and my sister were on we did his morning session. It was 2, 3 hours, sometimes four. And then we, of course, homeschool as much as possible and then we did an evening session with him. And that was all every day, all day, morning and evening.
Wow. And how did you get your homework done before the evening practice or after the evening?
Well, being homeschooled, we didn't the homework schedule wasn't as rigorous as say having to turn in assignments um like you would in a regular school setting. You know, my grandparents worked around our schedule.
And your grandparents were already retired at that time?
Correct.
So I just met a family of people originally from India who lived around the world, and they do that. The young lad has his grandmother chauffeuring him around. She's a real active person. She's
Mhm.
probably a tad older than I am.
That keeps her active also. If you
Yeah.
talk to if you talk to my grandparents, that's what kept them very active, our schedule.
And they feel that bloodline connection. They feel responsible.
Absolutely.
They look out for your path, and hopefully, if the kid's responding, it's a really nice reciprocity. So it's not having to crack the whip. It's this joint force
That's
of here
correct.
I am, the old person. I'm 2 generations older. Here you are, the young person. I've already done that, and I'm inviting you to do that every minute, every hour, every day. I'm inviting you into this process of a productive life.
Absolutely.
So the idea of wellness as separate from health and medicine and
Mhm.
testing
Mhm.
and pharmaceuticals and surgeries. Tell me about the first time you slowed down enough to consider this definition, this word wellness, where it was, and what it meant to you and what it means to you today.
So it was about 1999, 2000. I was in Naples, Florida. I think my mom was doing a consult around at Naples Community Hospital. They have this huge wellness. This was before major medical campuses was introducing, you know, the wellness centers in conjunction with their physical fitness programs and so on. You know, the big push before preventative health and preventative medicine came along. Um, and I was just enamored. I went over, we joined immediately. They had everything, PT, massage therapy, and basically it was just this holistic approach to wellness, what you just described. And since then, I've always been on board with not only a medical approach, not only a health slash medicine approach, but a wellness holistic approach to everything that is positive in life.
Forward progress in a balanced way and the power of slow. So one of the things I do in my coaching is I find supercharged people who have these schedules and they're going from A to B to C to D. And Oprah's personal trainer wrote about this in one of his books. His last name is Green, and his schedule was so dynamic and things could be changed that he was just another hour out of this long schedule. And if her schedule got a little crazy, she could blow off the appointment with Mr. Green, the personal trainer. And he said, Oprah, with all due respect, you're defeating what we're doing here
The
together. So
purpose,
it's not
correct.
just against me, it's not against you. It's the whole thing that we're doing here. It's like the contractor showing up and the hedges aren't trimmed back so the contractor could put the new siding on. Something's amiss, and it's not the contractor's fault. The whole system is breaking down. So over to Remy for some thoughts on that.
I mean, absolutely. It's a process. You know, you can't have one, two, and three, and you don't automatically jump to seven, eight, and nine without a beginning. There has to be a start, and it has to be a solid foundation. You know, which is why to take it back to tennis and training, you have to learn. That's why I'm a footwork and position specialist because footwork and positioning in the court is everything. It's the beginning, it's the end, it's everything to tennis. And especially with the way these athletes, I mean, you're talking about robo athletes now. They're so magnanimous that if you don't beat them with positioning in the court, you'll never beat them, you know?
So Remy, the idea of testing and they used to use monkeys back in the day. I think that's been frowned upon to a large extent in the Western world. They still use rodents, mice, and rats.
Mhm.
And I just learned within the last 10 years that somebody came up with a brilliant idea that, we're taking these rodents out of their natural setting where they're exposed to all these different things that affect their microbiome, the different bacteria in their system, the good bacteria, the bad bacteria. They used to have far different exposure. They could sleep when they want. They have to use their brain to go out and find their food. So they had this conscious and conscientious drive to be a mouse, to be a rat. And that was part of their dynamic. And so they do this, they'd be exposed to other rodents. They'd have to run sometimes from predators. So it's a completely different animal, physiologically.
That's being tested on is where you're going?
Yeah. And so
Okay.
the ones that they take and they put them in the lab, they're set up in a different scenario. They're bored out of their minds. They can't be normal. Their microbiome is completely different. And so all of these things, so we're throwing in all these tests. We're putting electrodes on them to test, for brainwave testing, whatever they can test. They've been doing that for 60 to 80 years. And now the last 10 years, I said, finally, somebody's come out with this idea that they're testing things in a way that's not correct. So if you test Remy and moi, and you compare athletes who live indoors and some outdoors, compare us to native people who are in a tropical jungle with their microbiome from nature affecting their own internal microbiome. They don't eat 3 meals a day. They may not eat for an entire day or two. And so it's a completely different test that you have to do to find out what health is, what wellness is, what balance is. Over to Remy, if you'd ever heard of this lab testing predicament that I just mentioned.
Hi, this is Sifu Slim, author of The Aging Athlete. In this book, you're going to get to hear about 2 different groups of former high-performance athletes. One group, which is made up of 90% of the former athletes, does not do physical activity on a regular basis and tends to suffer the consequences of a sedentary lifestyle. The other group, which is made up of 10% of the former athletes, is doing physical activity on a regular basis and tends to thrive through the aging process, or at least has a better chance at coping with the aging process. We could have taken these folks to a lab and done all kinds of tests on them. Instead, we slowed them down and sat them down and asked them, in their own words, to describe why they're wired the way they are, so that we all, former athletes and non-athletes, can use some of their inspirational and motivational and mindset lessons in our own lives. I hope you pick up a copy today. You can go to theagingathlete.com. And when you have a chance to read it, I'd love to hear back from you to find out what your thoughts are on the stories of these aging athletes.
I mean, being a clinical researcher myself, there's also a level of metaphysical that not only surpasses that, but the idea of making sure that there's a baseline. You have to have a control group. You have to have in your testing groups that you isolate, you have to have a control and you have to have a placebo. So of course, if the baseline is off, then your results will be off. Is that where you're going with? I'm trying to follow the stream here.
Yeah, one of the big things of the last 20 years is gut health, and the fact that we have these billions of bacteria in our system.
Our gut, correct.
And if we feed them sugar, then the bad bacteria proliferates and the good bacteria not so much. If we have a defiberized diet, each year it becomes less and less fiber. So if you go back,
and then your body becomes trained. Your body becomes trained to that because of so many bad organisms living in your system, your digestive tract.
That's it. And so we're treating people with medicine that's not taking account. Oftentimes, the holistic approach would also want to do a stool sample and want to take a look at our diet, figure out our stress level, all these things. But if your gut health is not on, which is pretty easy to see, because many of us go to the bathroom number two or three times a day, so you can see what's going on. If you have gas, if you have brain fog, and if you're burping, if you're discomfort in the between your heart, actually it goes way up here. Gas does its thing and affects your feeling in your chest. So From there all the way down to your colon, you can sense if you're connected to your body and if you're slowing down enough to assess it, and you're not just reaching for another soda, beer, or a coffee type of drink with lots of different things in it, you really can feel your system. That's why when you go on a yoga retreat, mind-body mindfulness retreat, they want to do some fasting. They want to watch what you're eating. They want to give you tea. They want to give you organic food, lots of fiber, lots of greens, and they want you to feel what it's like to be pursuing health and balance rather than just busy day. I'm going to grab whatever, mac and cheese,
Consuming
burgers, and
anything
fries.
or the maximum amount of sugar that you can. Now,
Yeah.
full disclosure, I do have a Starbucks addiction, but I'm getting rid of it.
It's good to have the full disclosure. Now, let's go back to residency. I spent 2 years of my life with someone when she was going through her last 2 years of residency. So I saw a life that had demands on it that were superhuman. And she didn't have any kids,
Correct.
but the work that she had, and then trying to do some health and recreation, connect with her family, do trips with me. It was quite a challenge, and it was exhausting. And
it's daunting and exhausting. Correct.
It's daunting, exhausting, and this was before ease of access of computer searches. So
yeah, technology. Correct.
Her paperwork and photocopies that she brought home started to fill the closet, and she was supposed to be accountable for a lot of this stuff to use it in treating patients. I'm saying this is insane. This is the early 90s in San Francisco.
Well,
I'm
sad
saying
thing about that
cuckoo.
is sad thing about that now is that it's reverted back to a bunch of paperwork. If you look at the normal physician, physician assistant, nurse practitioner, any type of provider or assistant provider, now they're being inundated with paperwork. So it's kind of, like I said, reverting back to the old way of doing things.
Wow.
And it's become a very I don't know if you've noticed or have heard so many people talk about the long wait times to see their providers and so on and so forth. And it's because of all of the paperwork that's involved with each and every patient.
So yeah, I wasn't just discussing, Remy, the paperwork of reporting what happened with the patient, what you're following, these types of things. I was talking about the research in her field of new stuff that they kept piling up on her, and she'd come home in her backpack with, that thick, that's 3 inches of stuff on a regular basis.
Well, if you have to stay, you have to stay current, however, and it's changing not only daily but hourly. And everything changes. So back to when we talked about change and being able to adapt to changing situations, residency prepares you for that, or should prepare you for that.
So here's the interesting piece. I wanted to ask Remy if he thinks the lifestyle in terms of physical movement. So one of my fields of study is sedentism in humans and in animals, the movement of our grandparents, the movement of hunting and gathering people, the movement of tribal people today, the movement of a desk potato, office potato, a postal worker at a counter. I consider them sedentary. They're just standing and going like this, a lot of them. Now, if you're doing a UPS, you're going in and out of trucks, hustling up to a front door, ringing the door, signature, back to the truck. And I asked somebody at Christmas time about 20 years ago how many deliveries he was doing a day, and he said he's done 400 in one day. Can you imagine?
In one day?
In one day, 400 deliveries.
I don't think that's normal.
It doesn't sound possible to me, but that's what he told me. Crazy amount. Boom, boom, boom. So maybe in one apartment complex he could do 20 at Christmas time. That would maybe if he did 10 20s, that gets us to 200. So maybe that's how he did it. Some were condos or apartment complexes.
Right.
Maybe some were just leaving and running, not having to do the signature. But so there's different ways of doing movement. Now I want to talk about the cousins of the closest primate cousin, the bonobos and the chimpanzees. So I'm going to ask Remy if there's any difference in calorie burning between the zooed animals and the animals in the wild per day.
Absolutely. Absolutely. They're not in a confined space. That's answer number one. Answer number two, as you mentioned with the testing animals and lab animals, just different, but when you change uh not only their environment but their lifestyle, then you have a change in activity level.
Okay, so here's the answer on that one. It's a stumper, but when they do, last time I said it, you have to warn people of when you got your information. I don't remember where, but the program that I watched, and I looked it up about chimpanzees in the zoo versus the wild, they
Mhm.
burn the same amount of calories per day. That was fascinating to me. Then
Wow.
I started to think about it, and this wasn't in the article. This is Sifu Slim using his brain and thinking he has a good hypothesis that I think is a good provable conclusion. It's that the chimpanzees in a zoo do not sit around like a human being on vacation in a chase lounge. They're constantly moving. 10 feet here.
They're engaging the people coming to see them as well. That part I
They,
do remember about
yep,
visiting.
yep. And because their arms are so strong, they plant off of those arms and they do a little move over here. They do a little move over there. And they do that constantly. But then, of course, they're going to kick back, put their feet up and lie down and take a siesta. But
Mhm.
they do a lot of movement if the zoo has some room, right? If they're in a
Right.
cage, not a lot of room. But let's say they've got a full expanse like an amphitheater you've seen a concert at,
Exactly. Exactly.
and some trees to climb. The chimpanzees are, even in the zoo, are still connected to their heritage of movement, and they're moving all the time. So that was
That's
fascinating to
reasonable.
me.
That's
Yeah.
reasonable. Yes.
So that's one of the things I wanted to share with people is, that when you're on an airplane from the East Coast to Europe and from Europe back to the East Coast, you tend to feel pretty darn cramped on that thing, not very comfortable. I don't
Mhm.
take knockout drops when I go on these trips. I know people who do. Imagine being on first class, you're taking, you take them?
I have. Yes.
Yeah. What's the word again? Not somnambulist, the French word. I forget the English word for sleeping pills.
So I definitely use not necessarily a sleep aid. I use a muscle relaxant.
Okay, like an ibuprofen or something like that?
No, ibuprofen is
Anti-inflammatory?
anti-inflammatory,
NSAID?
but yeah, NSAID.
NSAID.
Um, yeah, you want to muscle relax with like Flexeril or cyclobenzaprine or something like that.
Got it.
Yeah,
Muscle relaxer.
yeah.
Is it a neurological thing? It shuts something down in the brain that,
The connection between the muscle fibers and the brain, yes.
and does it just shut off a nerve or a brain impulse that fires the nerve?
Both.
Both. Fascinating. So I'll have to read up on that. Um, but there's a word for sleeping pills in English, and I'm drawing a blank on it. But in French word is somnambule, and somnifere is, I think, the word. Somnambule is somebody who has like sleepwalking.
Mhm.
Somnambule and somnifere or I think it's somnifere is a sleeping pill. But so those aids I haven't taken, but I do know that you can get antsy being cooped up. And over the course of my life, there's less chance of movement, there's less space on most airplanes. And so getting in your stretch, your movement, your deep knee bends. And since we've had more crazy stuff with, like 9/11 and then COVID, people are watching you do your stretching, and being out of your seat is a little bit different. They may hit the
Right.
button and say, you know,
They're
uh,
not comfortable.
yeah, they may want somebody to come back and have you return to your seat. So even the system says do not move. But when you get off the plane, yeah, like if you're fit and you're connected to your body, you know that you're not quite there typically. You might have a
Correct.
good flight and you might work out, and you might get some sleep just because of the way everything works out. But
Mhm.
let's say you're walking down to pick up your baggage at baggage claim. You do want to take account of the fact that you're stiff, you've been cooped up, and you don't want to lift a 50 or more pound bag,
Right.
in
Right.
a hurry, in an improper biomechanical way, these types of things. Tell me how you handle being an athlete and a doctor, how you handle some of these challenges on mobility.
I mean, while in flight or in
Yeah, and
general?
afterwards and lifting a bag and these types of things.
So, like I said, muscle relaxants help. If it's a short flight, then I'm definitely stretching. I do a yoga session morning. I do a yoga session in the evening. It depends. I try to stay as flexible as possible. I definitely do a hot soak if I know I'm going to be 2, 3 hours early to the airport. Definitely do a hot soak before I leave. You want to keep your body, keep your space, keep your chi to all aligned. While you're at the gate, you can do something. While you're on the flight, you can do something. I mean, no one's going to stop you from getting up and going to the bathroom, however slow or however long, how many lunges you can do to the bathroom or not, how many you can do right there at the bathroom door before you go back to your seat. There's always something you can do. You have to step outside of your comfort zone. Think outside of your space and not worry about what other people think or what else may happen because of what you do.
Yeah,
So take ownership is the number one answer. Take ownership of things that you need to do to stay healthy.
got it. I met a person who was 94, and he was a fellow from New York who used to work in the city and lived in a far away, not too far away, but far, like a 10 to 12 mile walk to his place of work. So his
Mm,
only physical movement in his career was those types of things, like when the train went down or power
mm,
outage and he had to walk home,
mm,
walking to the grocery store, those types of things.
mm.
Then what happened was, on a flight from Ireland back to California, or no, somewhere in the Midwest, maybe Chicago, he got an embolism in his leg,
In his
and they had
leg.
to,
Uh-huh.
yeah, and he had to on one of his, I think he had an amputation on his left leg, if I remember correctly. I met him back in 2008-ish at the beach, and I asked his daughter if I could talk to him because he was a pretty senior fellow, and I'm a
Mm,
fitness guy, and he was doing, with one leg in a bench at the beach, he was doing all kinds of, like, the thigh exerciser. He was
absolutely.
on his amputated leg versus the other leg. He was doing that. He was doing little things with bands, and he became like a Jack LaLanne fitness guy starting in his late
80s.
70s. And then he did, when I saw him, he was in his 90s. So he did that program, and that became his life force,
His
his chi.
lifestyle. Correct.
Yeah. And
Correct.
so, I mean, that type of thing really motivates you. And because he didn't quite know what was going on with his leg, he maybe didn't alert the crew early enough. I don't know how quickly the pain sets in if you have an embolism or a blockage in your leg. Maybe something along those
It's
lines.
it's almost instantaneous.
So you'd feel like a cramp or a thud or a sharp pain. What would you feel?
I mean, it's a range of, everybody's pain level is different or tolerance level is different. But yeah, I mean, you know when something's wrong. You know when something's wrong.
So you
And
want
that's
to
with
alert
anything.
people.
Yeah. You want to alert. You definitely want to alert.
And
But I don't know if you the row machine, the rower, either stationary or well, basically, it's a rower. That's the way of life. If you can't get on a rowboat, then get yourself a good rower. I would say skip the treadmill. I'm a big fan of the stair stepper. Don't get me wrong, not the actual one that's like an elliptical though, not the actual stairs that keep folding down and down and down. But if you can't do those things, get yourself a good rower, and you will never have an aneurysm or an embolism because you're moving your legs, you're moving your arms, and you're definitely increasing your cardiovascular output with your heart,
I
hence
just
cardiovascular.
I just looked up sleeping pills. They from the Greek word hypnos, sleep,
Hmm.
and hypnotic is what, or soporific, or
Soporific effect, meaning sleepy.
psychoactive drugs. Primary function is to induce sleep or surgical anesthesia and to
Mm.
treat insomnia. Okay, so the sedatives. There's the word. They're
A
related to
sedative
sedatives. It
effect
says.
or
Yeah.
melatonin. Correct.
Sedative hypnotic drugs is I guess the collective word that I was
Correct.
looking for. So here is a gentleman I've been blessed to receive an email from, and he and I wrote very similar books at the same time. His was published first. I never read his because I knew one little bit of his philosophy about running, and he's called the Barefoot Professor. He's at Harvard. His name is Daniel Lieberman, and here's Daniel Lieberman, great researcher, great professor, open-minded, fun guy, the Barefoot Professor, talking about the medicine ethic. We need to spend more time on preventive medicine.
Are preventable, and the problem is that in our society we don't value prevention very much. We may talk about it. We don't really put our money where our mouth is, right? In the US, which is arguably one of the worst healthcare systems, it is the worst healthcare system among the industrialized Western world. We spend approximately 3% of our budget, our medical budget, on prevention. And yet when people walk into a doctor's office, 75% of the time the disease is, according to the Center for Disease Control, a preventable disease. Absolutely. So we essentially spend nothing to prevent diseases that overwhelm our system and cause enormous amounts of misery. It's a completely backward, stupid system. And so, and the good news is it's not that hard to prevent a lot of these things. It takes willpower, and takes education, and it takes access to good quality food and whatever. So on the one hand, it's very depressing. On the other hand, the optimist in me says, we really can do something. And people, even if they're not wealthy or whatever, I mean, there are simple things that everybody can do to improve their health outcomes.
That's right.
We encounter today as we age, and just generally in our society, when you look at hunting.
So your thoughts, Remy? Ow!
What happened?
Oh, I got cramps in both legs. I wanted to share that while we were doing this conversation with a doctor, I didn't go down for the count. I went 90 degrees. My upper body had to go over to get a stretch into my hamstring, because if I stood up, even right now, I'm worried about this. It's like a bicep muscle from a bodybuilder in the back of your leg. The whole, from your hip down to the knee is saying, I'm not happy. And then that right in the, the upper middle part in that hamstring, it fires. And
like
maybe you can tell us what that is, Remy. What is a giant cramp, like a spasm?
That's exactly what it is. It's just a spasm where the muscle fibers are tightening into a ball, like your fist, and it's literally going to get there until you either massage it out, or the metabolism in your body, nutrient level in your body gets to an even balance to where it releases. So that's your only two options: pain or no pain.
So it's interesting that I took some of my supplements here to show the viewers and ask Remy about them. There's different types of magnesium, and there's 2 or 3 good ones, and then there's a couple that are common in the Long's Drugs type of supplements that are not the ones that they recommend for you. That I say they, meaning people who really know their nutrition. So just because a bottle says something on it doesn't mean that intelligent, knowledgeable people would want you to take that. So here's magnesium glycinate from Solaray. And I had that next to me, so I popped one of these, and these have 350 milligrams per serving. So the health food person I saw, who's really, I think, an intelligent person, reads a lot, thinks a lot, is an aging person like I am. We all are aging, but she's about my age. She said she wants me to take 3 of those 300 milligrams. Or did I say 350? Yeah, 350. I think she said 300s per day. See how it goes. I said, does that create diarrhea? And she said it shouldn't. So I don't know if you know anything about diarrhea and magnesium.
Well, I know not on a singular level, but if you increase your level, like if you're doing the glucosamine and chondroitin in addition to, so I do osteobiflex in addition to the Centrum multivitamin. So I'm doing, and like I told you, I double the dose on both 4 times a week, twice a day on those 4 days. And if you and I've noticed that if you do anything more than that, then yes, you are going to get digestive inconsistencies. And that could be anything. That could just be cramps. It could be diarrhea. It runs the gamut.
Yeah.
But on a singular level, that level should not give you any digestive issues at all. Let me ask you now, do you also do the apple cider vinegar? Because that also normalizes gut metabolism as well. The
Are you talking
gummies,
about acidity versus alkaline? Or are you talking about actual metabolism, slowing my metabolism? Or
both.
okay, so I do apple cider vinegar, but I am going to purchase it the next time in a gel cap form like this
Mm-hmm.
because it's hard for me to swallow it. I'm considered HSP, highly
Mm-hmm.
sensitive personality. So bright lights, powerful smells, a lot of noise, that type of thing. It affects us. And a lot of the empath healing type people are HSP people.
Mm-hmm.
But I did have some of these with my brunch today, some omega-3s.
Mm-hmm.
Again, it's easy to pop stuff into a bottle and sell them and say there's omega-3. But if you watch some of the documentary videos about omega-3, the people who really study this say you're getting a lot of the junk oil from a gigantic fish plant where they're just popping this stuff in pills. So
Pills, right, right.
yeah, and then you could also have overload on mercury. So you got to be careful with anything to do. These are not fish oil. These are from different substances. I can't remember where this might be, flax seeds, things like that. I can't read it on the side right now. But this isn't fish oil omega-3. This is EPA, DHA, 600 milligrams, Trader Joe's. And I just ordered some omega 369. There's a company that makes that's pretty famous, but I ordered something on Amazon. So there's omega 3, 6, and 9 all in one pill. And I've done that before. I think it's worked well. So I'm going to give that another shot. Do you know anything about omega 3?
So I was going to interject or wait until you finish, but I'm glad. Thank you for asking. I stepped away from fish oil in because I've been reading up and also the history of the krill oil versus the fish oil, and krill oil is more effective source of omega-3 fatty acids. So that's what I've been taking for the last 4 years. 4 years. It's
That's what
just
whales
it's more
eat,
powerful.
krill.
Correct. It's a more powerful source of omega-3s.
So here's the coconut water from Vita Coca, Vita Coca.
Mm-hmm.
And interestingly, that even after I've had a lot of fluid in my system, and I had a pretty good sized brunch after workout, tennis, rolling, all this stuff I did, that my body is saying, keep drinking. So that, that's good. I'm not like overloading my system to relieve a cramp. My body's saying, yeah, this is good. You
This is
need
what
it.
I need, right?
Yeah. So there are a couple of supplements. Here's another one that I believe Americans have been deficient in for, I don't know, I would say a few hundred years, except for the people living along the coast. This is iodine with kelp,
Mm-hmm.
and it comes in a dropper. Trying to see if the company is listed here. Functional Nutrition, I think, is the company. Oh, it's from Whole Foods. So very simply, it's pretty strong. So I put a little water in there and then drop it in under the tongue and keep it in there for a minute or two and then swallow the rest. So that is one of the other pieces. Here's Ester C, 1,000 milligrams with citrus bioflavonoids. I'm not saying any of these things are the best sources. I'm just saying that they're accessible to me and I believe they're working for me.
Mm-hmm.
Ascorbic acid is, in my opinion, not a good source of vitamin C. And it just happens to say vitamin C on the label, but ascorbic acid does have properties that work in some instances, not just taking them for our health, but in using that in preserves, making peach preserves and plum preserve, strawberry preserve. But what I figured out you can do to replace that, at least in the applesauce I made, was you just squeeze some lemons in there and mix it up, and that does the same effect. So anything on the nutrition that you wanted to share, Remy?
So I wanted to ask, are you having any joint issues, any issues with particularly your ankles, lower back, hips, knees, as you exercise and quality qualities of daily living and daily activity, what are you seeing as the improvement factors for not only if you're having pain, but other patients or friends of yours that are having issues with arthritis or the like?
Yeah, you mentioned Remy taking time off of tennis. How many total years was it where you were not doing heavy duty tennis?
So I didn't pick tennis back up until I got to Florida. So that was, say, 10 years old until 20, so 15 years, 14 years.
Okay, so you weren't on the hard courts blasting, running, stopping.
No,
So
exactly. None of that. It was just swimming. I was in the Air Force for some period of my college undergrad portion. Um, And so, just going to the gym with friends or working out myself to maintain whatever I had already maintained. But I didn't pick back up until the athlete portion until, yeah, 24, 25 when I got down to Florida for my pediatric rotation.
so you retired as a young person at 10,
At
11?
10 is when I stopped. I stopped the year I won my last state championship.
Did you play in high school?
I did not play in high school.
Okay. So you mentioned 18. So what was that calculation when
Not 18.
didn't you say something about Florida and then you said the word
Yeah,
18?
so in Florida, it was 24 when I got to Florida for my pediatric rotation.
So you total years off 14?
14, correct.
14. Okay. So and that in my estimation, if you were avoiding hard court, avoiding lots of jumping and stopping quickly, could give you a longer run later in life. That's just a guess.
Correct. Correct.
But since America, what would I call it? There's a word I want to use besides, how about silly? Being silly and throwing up hard courts all over the place. And hard courts don't do well with temperature differentials. They don't
Correct.
do well with sandy soil or soil that's going to move over time, which is, I mean, anytime you build a field and it's not perfect ground, you want to put down the topsoil, you put down sod, and you do things like that. So the soil, it takes years for that stuff to compact the way you'd want to compact it. And so when they build a cement tennis court, there's a budget, there's a contract, there's a bidding to do that, and they go in and they can't do everything the way they'd really want to do it, like at Flushing Meadows or somewhere where they have the time and the budget to do it correctly. So these tennis courts that we have in America, not only are they not good because they're too hard and they're too rigid when we stop, but they're also cracking. So
That's
they can
correct.
also,
And need to be resurfaced. Correct.
yeah, and they present until they finally say, okay, this court's a disaster. We're going to close it for a while and then find the budget, and then they resurface it. In the better way, in my opinion, to do it, if you're really poor, do what they do around the world for soccer, which is they build that sandy dirt place to play soccer on, and that can handle rain, it can handle whatever, and you don't ever have to worry about anything. You could drive a tractor through that thing and it doesn't leave any marks as long as it's not wet. It's just resilient. So that's the lowest end. And then along the way, I don't know how much putting in a hard true court costs, but if it's the
About
same
$60,000.
for one
Today's
court,
prices. Today's prices, yes.
yeah. And what would a cement court cost comparison?
30 to
Okay.
35,000.
So it's about half for the
Right.
cement. But the hard true is a little more maintenance, but it's better in terms of longevity.
Correct.
If you
And
build
I
it
can
without
think of one other, sorry to cut you off, but I could think of one other surface, that rebound ace or that rebound turf that these footballers are playing on, or these well, I would say what little leagues and kids and so forth that are playing all of these different sports in the field. That rebound ace would be perfect on a tennis court, and we honestly would be perfect for grass court practice as well. I just don't. The only place I've seen it is in the British Virgin Islands. I've seen them in Jamaica, but the only place I've really seen those things being put into practice on the tennis level is in the Caribbean. And sometimes they'll even throw, I know in Tortola, not only are they have the rebound ace, but they also put the sand from the beach, they'll put on the rebound ace also. So you have a mixture of grass and sand, which I've
Yes.
never seen before. Um, but that would be an even better and more cost-effective way of introducing a softer court to
Yeah.
America.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. So when I was in Playa del Carmen, Mexico, the favorite place I play down there is a all-inclusive hotel where they have four of those, they call them grass, pasto sintético, synthetic grass, and then
Hmm.
they put the sand on it. It's a
Sand, yeah,
little,
that's what they do in Tortola.
yeah,
Correct.
a little bit different than the beach sand, according to the pro. I saw him with his bag of stuff and he's laying it out there. And they
Uh-huh.
have to do that and move it around. And I said, how long do you get out of these courts? He said the lifespan of a heavily used court's about 8 years. But I loved it. And there's many other benefits. Better on the body,
Right,
longer points, which is
right,
nice.
right.
The ball's a little bit slower and the bounce is nice. It's a nice bounce.
Mm.
So you get into your timing on that, you're doing well. If you're doing doubles, you're a senior, you're trying to do your start and stop, it has give. So you could
Right,
you could do a
right,
little gives, a little
right,
slide. And then the other one is rain. So when it rains on that court, you can keep playing unless it's a
right.
huge
It absorbs
downpour.
well. Right,
And then it also, after the rain, it's you're back in action there much more quickly than any of
quicker.
the
Right,
other courts that
right,
I know about.
right.
So
Absolutely.
those are
And I
some
mean, I've
things.
seen I've seen Miami. There's a couple of places south of what's the big school there? University of Miami. So south of Boca, there's a park. I can't think of the name of the park right off the top of my head, but they've even found a way to use like the bark from a tree,
Yeah,
they've
yeah,
it's compressed bark as a surface.
yeah.
And man, I'm telling you, I have never seen anything like it, but it feels like almost, I mean, it just feels amazing. It's a soft court, clearly, but you're getting a true bounce and you're getting no stress on the body whatsoever. It feels amazing. Absolutely. I've never seen anything. As a matter of fact, before I see you tomorrow, I'm going to get the name of that park for you. Before I see you tomorrow, I'm going to get you the name of that park because I'm my fiance and I built a place down in Palmetto Bay, not Palmetto Bay, but Cutler Bay. It's in between Palmetto Bay and Cutler Bay. So I'll definitely have the name of that park for you tomorrow.
Good. Any last words before we head out, Ramy, that you want to share with the audience about performance and sustainability and doing the right thing?
Uh, Act. The biggest thing in anything that we do as humans, as part of this experience that we have, is action. You know, love someone, love anything as much as you can, but act on that love. That would be my biggest suggestion.
Live in love. That came out in one of my recent discussions. Live in love. And there's fear that's going to creep through. Deal
Hmm.
with it, assess
Hmm.
it, work through it, and get back to love as quickly as
As
possible.
possible, exactly.
That's the life of the healing person, the connecting person, the resilient person. If you live in
Right,
love, all that negative stuff comes at you, you
right,
qigong it, you roll
right,
with it,
right,
and you Mr. Miyagi it, you Yoda it, and
right,
then you come back and you keep the spirit, keep the faith, and
right.
there you are. And then you had a family, good support system around you. How
I
how do you
do.
do that now? I mean, you travel here to your family's home turf pretty frequently. Is that
Right.
some big part of the reason why you come down here?
I mean, it's the only reason in I mean, we don't need an excuse in my family to get together. Everything we do, if somebody, I hate to be so disgusting here, but if you pass gas, it's an excuse to get together in my family. So we're extremely connected, annoyingly so sometimes, but we're extremely connected. Um, Tennis is an outlet not only for myself, but a large portion of my family. But like last weekend was Mother's Day weekend, and we celebrated all the mothers in our family, and the great contingent of them there in the Savannah Hilton Head area. So it's a blessing. Family is a blessing. So, like I said, a big part of um, the quality of life for me, and I think is a recipe for everyone else is love.
So we'll leave it at that. Live in love, open up that heart, open up the mind, embrace it, and share it.
Right.
And there we are. And I'm Sifu Slim with
Remy.
Tareem Heath, Remy. And please like and subscribe and share this video. And we will talk to you in the next podcast. Wishing you all the best in your health, happiness, and wellness in mind, body, and spirit. Aloha.
Aloha and namaste.
Namaste to you, brother.
Thank you, man. I'm going back to sleep.